there's no way you could start off a team preview for the Los Angeles Lakers without addressing the biggest move that they made this entire offseason. That biggest move involved hiring a brand new head coach and, well, first of all, obviously firing a coach that was not quite successful, to say the least, in Darvin Ham. And in comes a process that led to a lot of controversy. Nobody knew exactly what was going on. Maybe it was going to be Dan Hurley, whatever the case was going to be. And at the end of the day, we do end up getting JJ Redick as the new head coach. Personally, for me, I think that he's going to be an upgrade over Darvin Ham. I don't think Darvin Ham is a bad coach. Now, there's lots of places for coaches to be, and one of those is as an assistant coach, when you can emphasize on one specific area of the game of basketball, which he's done great at throughout his career. But taking on the responsibility of a leader of a franchise is not something that everybody's carved out for, and I don't think that was his role. In comes JJ Redick, a guy who is very well aware of what it's like to be in an NBA locker room, has had great success, is a very outspoken kind of guy, and I think he's going to be a good coach. Now, I would not be able to sit here right now and tell you guys that I'm fully confident that he's going to be the next Steve Kerr or any great coach, because it is difficult for somebody to go from playing as quickly as he did to becoming the head coach of an NBA franchise, let alone the Los Angeles Lakers, the one of not the biggest brands in the entire world. Is not an easy job for anybody, let alone someone in that position. And so there's going to have to be a learning curve to some extent. What that extent is going to look like, I am not 100% sure. Also, the fact that there was a prior relationship, obviously, with LeBron James does create an interesting dynamic in the locker room where we will see exactly how that unfolds in that close relationship. But I'm not too concerned about that regard, because you're always going to have the coach and the best players will always have the closest bond, most likely, I should say, in every situation of sports. So not too concerned there. I can't sit here, though, and tell you guys a confident approach of saying I know exactly what he's going to bring to the table, because I don't. He's never coached before, and he's not a guy that has had a track record of coaching or has even been an assistant coach or whatever the case may be. So I can't give you guys an honest reaction to how he coaches. What I can say is what I do know of him as a very high IQ player, a player with a lot of success throughout his career, a guy that's been in deep playoff runs, has had a lot of great moments in the NBA, and does have very, very strong, deep understanding of the game of basketball that we have been able to see since he's retired. So overall, I have no problem with the hire. I do like it for the Lakers. It was an upgrade, I believe, and it will be something interesting to watch. But ultimately, there has this debate. What is more important, the head coach or the roster? It is, nobody really has a definite answer. My approach is that it's almost a 50-50 extent. You could have a very talented roster coach that has no idea what they're doing. Their roster will not be utilized to the full extent. Maybe if you stack up a Golden State, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond would be the most interesting approach to see how that would have worked out without a legit coach, but you never will have the answer to that. But at the same time, no matter how great a coach is, the roster is going to have a massive influence on how great that team can be. And so I want to break down this roster because I'm going to be honest about it. I have a mixture of optimism from one extent, but also a sense of confusion when I look at this roster. I'm going to start with the pros, the good of this roster, and to break it down right at the gate, I said this right after the Team USA win, and I got to watch the full extent of many, many games of LeBron James and Anthony Davis playing at an extremely high level, not only on a team stacked with the best players in the NBA, but also on a platform and on a stage where you were playing some of the best players throughout the entire world, and yet they look like, and if not were, the best players on the court every single time, particularly LeBron James, but Anthony Davis certainly had a lot of great moments. And so when I watch that and I see, well, LeBron can win MVP of a tournament that has the best players in the NBA. Now, it wasn't a long 82-game NBA season, but he certainly showed that he could still be that top-tier level player. And then I watched Anthony Davis play at the level he did. I said before, the question for me was, how is this team not better than they are when they hop on over to the NBA? And that is still the big question at hand for myself when I evaluate these Lakers. You have the star power, but yet the wins are not coming for this team. And I was led to believe that maybe it was that LeBron is just getting older and whatnot, and this team just can't possibly contend the way he once was able to. I don't believe that any longer. Is he the best player, undisputed best player in the NBA? No, he's not that anymore. But there's no reason LeBron James can't be the first or second best player, whatever the case may be, on a championship team, especially when your second best player is Anthony Davis, who is a top I don't have my rankings done right now. I'd say easily top 15, maybe top 10. Like I said, it's not, I don't have it planned out in my mind right now, but he's certainly well up there. It's mind boggling this team can't be a legitimate contender by perception and how we view them right now heading into the season. So I have to look at that. I just said, obviously, LeBron is LeBron, Anthony Davis is LeBron, is Anthony Davis. I'm very high on those two guys. So then you're going to ask, well, where is the part that you just told me about where you're a little bit a skeptic on and you're a little confused on? Well, it's the rest of this roster. We watched them perform last year. We saw what, for the most part, a lot of these guys are capable of and how they play together. And yet there were no moves this entire offseason outside of coaching change, which I said is very valuable and that could have solved a lot, maybe. But you add in Bronny, who, just keeping it real, he's not going to be a game changer on the season. And then you finally add something that I really do like in adding Christian Coloco to this roster and on a two-way deal. But this roster, we just saw how they played. And you also had Dalton Knecht. Sorry about that. Yes, he's also out on this team. I'm very high on him, which I'll be getting into in a second. But you didn't really make moves that's going to drastically alter this team for the most part. That's where I'm confused. Because when I look at this team, like I said, they have the star guys. That's the hardest thing to get in the game of basketball, is to get the star players that can play together and play at a high level together. And they got that in Anthony Davis and LeBron James. But I look at this roster and there's talent, but it just seems like it's missing something. It's just, something's not right when I look at this roster. And that's what I want to get into today. So right now, the starting lineup, in my opinion, if I were to make it today, I view it as this. D'Angelo Russell will be the starting point guard, and the backcourt mate for him will be Austin Reeves. LeBron James will be your forward. Rui Hachimura will also be starting for yourself, and obviously Anthony Davis at center. That's why I have the starting five. However, this is not a starting five that's solidified. I say two guys are 100% locked in as being starters. That's LeBron James, Anthony Davis. I'm about 95% locked in saying Reeves is your starter. Outside of that, there's a lot of openings, though. And that's what I want to discuss, because for me, I've always wanted to see Anthony Davis run power forward. Now, they do not have a center on this roster. That's one of the big weaknesses that I would like to see start for him. But that's something I would like to see. And Anthony Davis has mentioned many times they've yet to let him be a power forward and bring in a legitimate center for him to run in recent years. But when I look at this roster, D'Angelo Russell is about as much of a hit or miss player as you get in the NBA. D'Angelo Russell is a guy that is obviously extremely talented. But as we've seen, there's a lot of times where he's going to have bad games, and those bad games can alter the entire game that night. It seems to have a massive team effect when he does not play at a high level or decide to take the night off, or whatever the case may be. But the biggest thing I'm going to get into on this roster that I'm concerned about is the depth. Because when you look at the LA Lakers, this team is built by the fact that you have two stars, and you'd assume that then the rest of the roster is built out with high-level rotational pieces. But this team doesn't have that. There's not a mixture of high-level rotational pieces all around the LA Lakers, and that's where I'm concerned about for this roster. So what I wonder is that I look at this bench, and the bench is not very well put together. And the one thing I'll look at right now is what I would ideally like to see is, I think that while D'Angelo Russell can be a starter on a lot of teams in the NBA, the place I would love to see him at is a sixth man. I think D'Angelo Russell could be a prime candidate to be an elite sixth man in the NBA if that so were the role that he was forced to play. The only option to let him play that role would essentially be moving Austin Reeves to point guard and bringing somebody else in to start at shooting guard, or however you want to maneuver that, running LeBron James at the point guard, or letting Gabe Vincent start, who, after last season, I'm not letting him be the starting point guard at this point in the season. Therefore, D'Lo is kind of solidified and locked into being the starting point guard for this roster, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it certainly is not the role that I would prefer if I'm trying to win an NBA championship. So this roster right now, like I said, the starting five is not that bad. When I think of D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, LeBron James, Hachimura, Anthony Davis, that is fine. It is capable of being good and making a run in the playoffs. But then we get to this bench. And as I said, for a team that is structured the way it is with two guys as the stars, and then you leave essentially the max spot open to build out the rest of the roster, it doesn't look like a bench that has a max slot being attributed to this entire bench buildup. And so you look at it, your backup point guards are essentially split behind Gabe Vincent, who missed the vast majority of last season. Good player if we're talking about Miami. Great player there. But I don't know what I'm going to expect from him this year. And it's hard to give a truly trustworthy statement in regards to Gabe Vincent. And then you have backing him up, essentially, or competing with him, maybe even Jalen Hood-Schifino and Bronny James. Jalen is a guy that was drafted high, and I know a lot of Laker fans are down on him and what he did this first year. Was not the best rookie season. You could hope that he has a breakout season in year 2. I can't guarantee anything. I know I was a little bit higher on him when he was coming out of college, but didn't work out so far in the NBA. And Bronny, I'm not going to rely upon him when he heads into the NBA this season. It is what it is. Okay, that's your backup point guards. Not very trustworthy guys right there. Then we had a backup shooting guard. A little bit stronger in this regard. You have Max Christie, and that's a guy that obviously I'm glad they brought back. They extended him and are going to retain Max Christie. I do like Max Christie a lot. I think he could be a guy that, truly to solidify himself as a potential starter if it matches up and you switch the rotation around or whatever, but is a trustworthy guy off your bench and on the rotation. Then you get to small forward, essentially backups. And this also is a place where there are question marks. Cam Reddish is a guy that early in the season last year did have flashes. Not so much in the second half of the season overall. There are things when you talk about that he can bring defensively, but there still seems to be a perception that his potential was so high. How much of that can he still reach? I feel like there just hasn't been a legitimate role in which he's established himself as and embraced that role yet. He is a guy that could be good, but once again, I'm not going to sit here and say I trust him to be a championship contending rotational player. Then you get a guy that I do think was a good draft pick by Rob Pelinka, Dalton Connect. I'm not going to speak highly on any rookie saying he's going to be out here and dominate or anything along those lines, but his role being able to be an elite shooter, be a guy that can score at times off the dribble, whatever the case may be, should be very beneficial to this roster. Him being a guy that's going to be a key rotational piece, I see that as highly likely, but also competing for a starting spot if things aren't going very well with the starting lineup. I could see that as well. So I do love that draft pick. I think he's going to win that job and be a 7th, 8th man rotational piece for this Lakers roster. Then you have Max Lewis is in there as well, a guy that has athleticism. We didn't see a lot of him with the Lakers last year overall. Could he have made a jump this year where he's a rotational aspect and impact on this roster? Sure. But, I'm not 100% confident saying, let's go have Max Lewis be a key piece to this team this year yet. But I do like his ability, his potential. He could get rotational minutes this year. The most guaranteed solid foundational backup piece that they have is Jared Vanderbilt. He's a guy that you could swap places with in Rui Hachimura, and I would be not opposed to that depending on matchups and whatever the case may be. But Vanderbilt's another guy that I do like a lot. I think he's the most trustworthy guy off this bench at this point in time. Interchangeable defensive aspects. He's not a liability on offense. I do like Jared Vanderbilt. Here's another big weakness for me on this roster: the backup rotations at center. Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood. Christian Wood was a guy that I thought would have found his role a little bit better last year, and that certainly did not happen. Maybe he finds himself again this year. I'm not sure on that. And that seems to be the case with a lot of these guys. That's the problem with the bench here. But you also have Jackson Hayes, another guy in which, he right now I'd have him slotted as the backup for Anthony Davis at this point in time. But once again, with these guys, there's so many guys on this bench right now where I look at them and I question, are these guys able to contend with the bench that they have? The buildup of this roster seems structurally weird because the centers aren't very deep. And then you look at power forward and you have a 2-man rotation essentially there. The small forward is the strongest, I'd say. But then you get to the point guard situation, the guard situation. It's just not, it doesn't look right to me in my opinion. But with that being said, this is the LA Lakers. They have the capability of making moves. And when I look at this roster, the most notable thing for me is that Rob Pelinka has to be on the hot seat this season. There were no moves for the most part this offseason on a roster that has an aging LeBron James, a prime Anthony Davis, and you're in LA. You are the Los Angeles Lakers. If this team has another bad year, he's got to go. And if he has to go, then you're going to have questions about what's going to be in store for the head coach now, in JJ Redick. Not really a situation you would like to be in. So I'm very shocked that Rob Pelinka had a lack of moves this year. That being said, you are the LA Lakers, and you should be able to acquire another guy in an acquisition, whether that be in training camp, whether that be during the regular season, heading up to the trade deadline, because odds are this roster is not going to work out heading into that point in the season. There's going to need to be a lot of changes that go down throughout the next few weeks or possibly a few months of the NBA season to get this roster built out. Now, here's a few things I'm going to add that I am positive and high on. One is that they have a guy signed on an E10 deal that I do like potentially making this roster. Now, the roster is pretty much solidified, but can he win a training camp battle? Could he possibly earn a situation where they make a trade package to get an opening roster spot to get him, and that's Jordan Goodwin. I think he's a guy that he is capable of being a solid rotational depth piece on a roster, and I do like what he brings to the table. So that was a nice move by the E10 deal that they have with him, but will he actually make the roster because they are capped down on spots? They have locked in the entire roster. There's 15 spots on this team. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. The two-way deals are interesting because I did talk about the center problem. Well, they now have two guys that I would not mind and would not be shocked seeing eventually be a part of this Lakers rotation. Christian Koloko is the guy they just brought in. He has a potential to be, if he's still healthy and can get back to himself, an elite rim protector. Averaged 1 block a game as a rookie in the NBA. Not a high-level scorer in all these different aspects. We saw flashes, though. I would not mind seeing him, or would not be shocked to see him potentially take over and be the backup center by the end of the NBA season this year. Colin Castleton's another guy that I do like a lot, and I would not be shocked to see him possibly get an opportunity with the NBA and be with the Lakers by the end of the season as well on a standard deal. Both of the guys I do like as well. You also brought in Armel Traore. He's a guy that you could see as well possibly develop over time. Not as high on him overall, but Koloko, Castleton, two guys I would not be shocked to see him legitimately make a push to be on this roster for the Lakers. So therefore, I have to say this. When I look at this roster, you have a lot of guys that have question marks. If these question marks for the Los Angeles Lakers are solved and they end up having good seasons and proving people wrong, then this could certainly be a team that you see as contenders, because the most important part is getting your stars in line, and they have that situation settled already in LA. If those guys don't pan out, then they're going to need to make moves, because they need that sixth man, as I've said, somebody that can embrace and lead the bench unit. A guy like Jordan Clarkson, someone I would like to key in on and would not be shocked at, or a move to D'Angelo Russell running sixth man. Not shocked at that, as long as you get a legitimate point guard to take a spot. They're going to need that. Dalton Knecht is another guy that I do see as a potential X factor for this roster. He has the chance to be a high-level bench player. If they give him that opportunity and if he's able to produce, that would be huge for this team. But as I said, at the end of the day, this team has depth, but it's not solidified depth where I trust it. There's only 6 players I trust on the roster today. There's too many questionable players. Between Gabe Vincent, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Bronny, Cam Reddish, Max Lewis, Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, a lot of guys that I don't know exactly what they're going to bring to this team this year, and I'm not 100% sold on them. So for all those guys, they're going to have to make moves and figure out how this roster works. The last point I wanted to say is this, though. The bright spot that I will acknowledge, that I do have hope for, and that I do see as a potential bright spot to look at for the Lakers, is in regards to Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves signed the deal last year with a lot of hype behind him. The last season was not really the year that people were expecting. Was it bad? No. Was it horrible? Of course not. Was it what people were hoping in terms of the jump he could make? No. And I feel like he's almost becoming a little bit underrated now. A lot of people aren't talking about him in the light that he probably should to some extent be. Now, I know there was a lot of hype, getting a little bit too much maybe so about a year ago or so, but at this point, if I'm looking at the LA Lakers, the biggest X factor for this team is Austin Reeves. If Austin Reeves can develop and take the jump that a lot of people were hoping he the biggest X factor for this team ultimately is Austin Reeves. And the reason I say that is because if he's capable of making the jump that a lot of people were hoping him to see him make just about a year or so ago, that would be huge for the LA Lakers. That would give them the third best player on this roster and a guy that they could trust to score, create off the dribble to a certain extent, be a guy that faces the floor for LeBron James, Anthony Davis as well. He fits perfectly alongside what the core of the Lakers are. And I think he has the potential to make that jump and play at a high level this upcoming season. So I'm really keen on that, because the biggest X factor for the LA Lakers is going to be Austin Reeves. If he produces at the way that a lot of people think he can, then they're going to be set up for a lot of success this upcoming season. He will rise the potential of the Lakers drastically if he's able to be a guy that could score 17, 18, maybe even push the limits. I don't think it'll get to this point, but 20 points per game, that could get them a legitimate third option on that LA Lakers team that sets them up for a position to possibly make a run in the playoffs. Now, remember, the Western Conference is deep. There is a lot of talent in the Western Conference. How much of a run can the Lakers make? I'm not sure. Right now, I'm not going to consider them contenders. But they have the opportunity via trades and whatnot to possibly make a move to become legitimate contenders. And that's really what I look at for the Lakers, because the hardest part has been established with LeBron James, Anthony Davis being there. You have to just make sure you actually build a roster that surrounds those two guys. And if that is done, then the Lakers are in great situation and in a great position heading into this season and could become a legitimate contender if I were to redo this in a few weeks or months, whenever those trades eventually happen. Or if these guys, all the question marks I have on this team, end up getting situated and solved, and we have a lot more security and understanding of these guys and their possibilities.